The year was 1872, and the world had frozen solid around me. It wasn't just the Montana winter, though the cold was a bone-deep ache that never left. It was the solitude. My ranch, a lonely outpost in a high valley, was a monument to the life I had lost. The wind howled a constant mournful song through the pines, and the snow fell so thick it could bury a man's hope. I had lived out here for 7 years, and in that time I'd learned to talk to no one. My name was Rowan McAllister, and that was all anyone needed to know. I was a man in his late 30s, but my back carried the weight of a century. My hair, a short-cropped brown, was already dusted with gray at the temples. The long, jagged scar beneath my ribs, a souvenir from a saber back in 2064, was a constant reminder that some wounds never truly heal. They just get colder. After losing my wife Alara and our boy Thomas to the fever that swept through New Mexico, there was nothing left to lose. I lived by routine wake with the stars coffee black and thick enough to float a nail feed the horses chop the firewood. It was a mechanical life, a way to move through the days without having to feel them. That night a blizzard was blowing in hard. The wind rattled the barn slats like 1,000 ghostly fingers scratching at the wood. I was out there trying to fix a latch a horse had kicked loose when I heard it. A sound that shouldn't have been there. It wasn't the usual creak of frozen wood or the stomp of a restless mare. It was a soft dragging noise, a shuffling like someone trying to be swallowed by the dark. My hand went to the .44 holstered at my hip. The familiar weight was a comfort. I unclipped the flap and moved toward the sound, the lantern in my hand throwing long dancing shadows. Inside the barn smelled of frozen hay manure and the sharp bite of a winter night. I moved past the stalls, the horses shifting, blowing steam from their nostrils. And then I saw her, a small figure curled into a corner of the hay stall. My first thought was a lost child, but the light caught the pale curve of a bare leg, the soft sweep of a hip, and a tangle of black hair. She was a woman no more than 20, maybe less. She was hunched over a wounded animal in a winter den. Her deerskin dress was torn to the waist, revealing a shoulder caked in dirt and a deep mottled bruise. The front was gashed across her chest, a wound that exposed the curve of one breast and the shadow of her cleavage. Dried blood had stiffened the fabric at her ribs. Her right ankle was swollen, twisted at an unnatural angle beneath her. Her skin was a rich earthen brown, but underneath the grime I could see the soft feminine vulnerability of someone deeply hurt. My breath hitched. I froze, my jaw clenched so tight it ached. I didn't move closer. I didn't yell. I didn't even draw my gun. I just stood there, my own breathing, a quiet ghost in the biting cold, weighing the moment. I had seen women like her before, not in this exact way. Not bleeding in my own barn, but in the war, in camps on the run. I knew what fear looked like. And I knew what happened when a scared person was cornered. She hadn't noticed me yet, or maybe she had, but the pain had her pinned. Slowly, deliberately, I lowered the lantern to the ground. Then, without a word, I turned and walked out. I didn't say anything, didn't do anything. I just let her be. The next morning, I was up before the first hint of light, same as always. I started the fire, the frozen kindling crackling as it caught. The coffee pot hissed a low tune, a sound that felt as old as my loneliness. I ate a half-burnt biscuit, fed the horses, and then walked back to the barn with a tin cup of steaming water. She was still there, curled a little tighter. Her eyes were closed, her face turned into the hay, but she had moved. One arm was now wrapped across her chest, clutching her torn clothing like she was trying to hold herself together. Her breathing was short, her lips dry, her chest rising and falling fast like she was still running in her sleep. I approached slowly, no sudden movements, no loud noises. I knelt just out of reach and set the tin cup down on a plank beside her head. The moment I did, her eyes snapped open. They were big, dark, and utterly alert. They locked on mine. There was fear there, yes, but more than that, there was a flinty hardness. Not broken, not begging. She was watching me, judging me. I didn't flinch. "Ain't gonna turn you in," I said, my voice a rasp from disuse. "The water's clean. You need it." She didn't move. She just stared at me, her eyes unblinking. I stood, walked out, and left her to it. I knew I had to go to town for supplies, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. The day was spent in a kind of purgatory. Every time I looked toward the barn, I saw her in my mind's eye. I saw the fear and the defiance, and I saw a quiet that matched my own. That night the snow started to fall again, soft and steady. I was staring out the window, a cup of coffee in my hand, when I saw her. She was outside near the frozen creek in the pale moonlight. She was kneeling in the shallow water, washing herself, her bare torso exposed to the frigid air. Her ribs were stark and thin but strong. Her back was a landscape of scratches from crawling through brush. Her hair was soaked, hanging like frozen rope down her spine. When she turned slightly, I saw the full curve of her chest marked by bruises, the kind left by rough hands. She saw me. Her eyes met mine across the dark snow-covered yard. She didn't move. She didn't try to cover herself. She just held my gaze with a steady, tired defiance. I didn't stare, but I didn't look away either. I just gave her a single nod, a sign of respect, and turned back to the house. She could have the damn creak. Her dignity was her own. A while later, I heard the back door creak open. I turned from the stove, my rifle leaning in the corner where I always kept it. There she stood, her hair still damp, one of my old shirts draped over her small frame. The frayed sleeves were rolled up and hung low on her shoulders. The buttons weren't done right, the shirt was too big, and her dress was bundled in her arms, a dark, wet lump torn beyond repair. She didn't speak. I didn't either. I just stepped aside. She walked in her bare feet, silent on the floorboards, and my heart gave a strange little lurch. She didn't look like a girl anymore. She looked tough and stubborn. I poured a second bowl of the venison stew I'd made, handed her a spoon, and sat down across the table. We ate in silence. Her eyes never left me, tracking every move I made. When the bowl was empty, she pushed it forward, folded her hands in her lap, and waited. I rummaged through an old trunk and returned with a thick wool quilt. "Floor's better than dirt," I said, my voice flat. "Ain't much, but it's yours for now." She hesitated for a breath, then took the blanket. She settled near the hearth, not close enough to reach the dying embers, but not hiding either. She wrapped the quilt around herself, her eyes half closed, her body still tense. But she was inside now, dry and fed. I watched her for a long moment before blowing out the lamp. Lying in my cot, I listened to her breathe. She didn't cry. She didn't ask for help. She didn't say thank you, and I didn't need her to. That night something shifted. Not trust, not yet. But the silence had changed. It wasn't an empty chasm anymore. It was a space shared. And for the first time in years, the cold didn't feel so absolute. The morning came slowly. Pale light filtered in through the warped wood slats of the ranch house, painting faint lines across the dusty floor. The hearth had long gone cold, but I could feel her presence. I was already up, moving through the kitchen, boiling coffee over the stove. I didn't look at her, but I knew she was still there. I'd heard her breathing shift around dawn, the kind of slow intake a person makes when they're awake, but pretending not to be. I poured 2 cups, set one on the table, and took the other to the window. I stood there watching the snow-covered yard like it might try something. Behind me, the faint rustle of the blanket, the soft tread of bare feet on wood. She didn't speak, and I didn't either. She sat, lifted the cup, and sipped slowly. Her hands were smaller than I expected, the fingernails' cracked knuckles scraped. A dark bruise now showed along her forearm, stark against the fabric of my shirt. I finally spoke the words, feeling foreign on my tongue. "You from around here?" She stared into the steam rising from the cup, then nodded once, a quick, almost imperceptible motion. "Your name?" I asked. A long pause, so long I thought she wouldn't answer. Then her voice, barely above a breath, said, "Mika." I gave a single nod. "Rowan McAllister." That was it. But it settled something. She ate what I cooked, biscuits and leftover stew, and didn't flinch when I walked past her. She didn't relax either, not fully. She was watching every move I made, every exit I didn't take. She was a survivor. After breakfast, I stepped outside and said, "You can stay if you want, but I need help." No answer came. I didn't wait for one. By noon, she was outside, not close to me, but not hiding either. She watched me split wood, the axe ringing out in the cold air. She watched me haul water from the well, the rope stiff and frozen in my hands. Then after a long pause, she limped to the fence and started clearing away the dead snow-laden brush. I glanced over but didn't say a word. She moved slowly, favoring her right ankle, but there was a stubborn set to her shoulders. When she crouched, the back of the shirt rode up, exposing the curve where her spine met her hips, a patch of clean skin against the winter grime on her thighs. I looked away, not out of guilt, but out of a sudden sharp respect and a little confusion. She was beautiful, yes, but that wasn't the part that unsettled me. It was the fact that for the first time in a long time, I wanted to say something that wasn't about chores or the weather. I wanted to ask if she was in pain. I wanted to tell her I was glad she hadn't run. I didn't, because a man who talks too much is a man who shows his cards. Later, when the sun was dipping low behind the frosted peaks, she came into the kitchen and took the bowl from my hands before I could serve supper. She ladled stew into both bowls, set them on the table, and sat. I blinked, then sat across from her. Where were you headed? I asked, not expecting an answer. Nowhere, she said, her voice quiet flat. I ran. I nodded. From what? She stared at me, her eyes distant, as if she were seeing it all again. 3, on horses. One had a rope. My jaw flexed. I looked down at my bowl. Did you kill him? She shook her head. Cut one. Ran. Think they're still looking. She shrugged, a small movement. Don't know. I didn't press. I just said, if they show, I'll handle it. That made her eyes lift. Sharp. Skeptical. You fight for me. I don't turn people out, I said, my voice low. Not after they bled in my barn. She stared at me for a long time, like she didn't believe me, like maybe no one had ever said that to her before. Or if they had, they meant something else. That night she cleaned the dishes while I stacked firewood. When I came back inside, she was standing near the hearth again. She didn't lay down. Instead, she watched me. The lamp was low, throwing long, comforting shadows. She reached for the hem of my shirt and adjusted it. When she did, the collar slipped down her shoulder, a patch of skin showing clean, now smooth, unmarred. She didn't fix it. I paused, my hand still holding the edge of the woodpile. She didn't say anything, just met my eyes. I walked to the trunk, pulled another blanket free, and held it out. You'll be warmer tonight. She took it, her fingers brushing mine. For the first time, she didn't pull away. Still no smile, no thanks, but something had changed in that touch. Before bed, I checked the front door, latched the windows, and set my rifle by the cot. Not because I feared her, but because the world outside was still turning, still dangerous. I lay down with my back to the wall, the blanket pulled to my waist, the room dim with the dying firelight. I heard her settle in again. I listened for the sound of her breath. It came slower this time, less guarded, less like someone trying not to exist. And in the quiet, I let my eyes close. For the first time in a long while, Rowan McAllister didn't feel completely alone in his house. And somewhere, maybe just barely, she didn't feel hunted. Not that night. Not under my roof. The next morning was different. I felt it in my bones before the sun was even up. The kind of feeling that came from years of scouting, of reading tracks, of listening for a wind that didn't match the trees. I stirred from my cot before the first rooster crowed, my body a coiled spring of tension. I moved to the window without putting on my boots. The yard was still a pristine white blanket of new snow, but there were fresh tracks in the dirt beneath it. Hoof prints, 2 sets close together. From last night or earlier. Not mine. I turned from the window and reached for my shirt. Mika was already awake. She stood in the kitchen barefoot, one hand gripping the side of the table like she knew something was wrong. Her hair was tied back roughly with a piece of string. She didn't ask what I'd seen. She could tell. Riders passed through, I spoke low. Looking for me. I nodded. Could be anyone. But it's not. She stepped back from the table, her whole body tense like she was deciding whether to run or grab a weapon. I crossed the room and opened the door, slow, not with panic but with calculation. The cold hit my face like a slap. I didn't see anyone yet, just the open stretch of frozen land and the brush along the road. I stepped out onto the porch, the rifle still leaning inside by the door. Mika stayed behind me, not clinging but watching the way I watched. 10 minutes passed. Then we heard it. A single rider approaching, the sound of hooves against the dry, hard earth. Not fast, just steady. I waited until the figure came into view, then stepped out fully into the yard. It was Deputy Finch, mid-40s, too clean for a man who claimed to ride hard and mean in the way that grew out of boredom and cowardice. He wore his badge like a license to lean too close and speak too loud. I'd crossed him once 3 years back over a land claim. He hadn't seen me since. Hadn't needed to. Now he was here. Finch pulled his horse to a stop near the fence and spat a brown stream of tobacco juice into the snow. Didn't expect to see you out here, McAllister, he said, tipping his hat in mock greeting. Heard you'd gone full ghost. I didn't reply. Just stood tall. Got word a couple of Apaches been seen headed west, he said, looking around. 1 woman, maybe 2. One's hurt some. A few local boys said they tracked her as far as the gulch. Blood trail led toward your side of the land. I didn't move. I seen coyote tracks. Nothing else. Finch smiled, thin and sharp. You always were good with tracks, that's so. He raised his voice. Mind if I take a look in your barn just to make sure nothing's bleeding where it shouldn't be? I didn't answer. I just took 1 step forward. Number. That was all. No explanation, no anger, just number. Finch's smile dropped a degree. You hiding something, McAllister. I'm telling you to ride on. Silence stretched between us, as cold and taut as the frozen wires on my fence. Behind me, the door opened slightly. Mika didn't come out, but I knew she was watching. and I knew Finch had seen the shadow move. His voice changed then. Softer, meaner. You know what happens if someone's harboring a fugitive, even an Indian? I didn't flinch. She ain't no fugitive. She's Apache. That's all it takes. My jaw twitched. My hands clenched at my sides. Then Finch leaned forward in the saddle and said, "You planning on laying with her too? I heard things about you quiet types. All lonely out here. Starts to rot the mind." That was when I moved. I didn't hit him. Didn't raise a hand. I walked straight up to the saddle, real slow, grabbed the reins tight near the bit and stared up into his eyes. My voice was a low growl, a rumble of thunder. "She's under my roof. You say one more word like that, I'll knock you out of that saddle and drag you back to town with your tongue stuffed down your throat." Finch didn't speak. Didn't move. My knuckles were white, my fingers frozen stiff to the leather. I saw the fear in his eyes buried deep under his false bravado. I let go. The deputy pulled his horse back a few feet, all that fake calm slipping a little around the edges. "You think you're untouchable just 'cause you fought for the Union," he hissed. "No," I said. "But I fought. You just talked." Finch sat there for a second longer, his eyes burning into mine. Then he clicked his tongue and turned the horse around. "This ain't done," he said over his shoulder. I stood still until the sound of hooves was gone. Then I walked back inside, shutting the door behind me. Mika stood there, arms folded across her chest. I didn't look at her right away. I set the rifle down, poured myself water, and drank it in one long, desperate gulp. Then I finally said, "He saw you." She nodded. "You want me to leave?" Another pause. Her voice was flat but steady. "If I leave, he'll follow." I didn't ask what she meant by that. I already knew. "Then you stay. We'll handle what comes." She stepped closer to me now, not near enough to touch, but closer than she had ever been before. "You fight for me," she said again, this time not as a question. I looked her straight in the eyes. "If I have to." Her expression didn't change, but her body did. The tightness in her shoulders eased. Her arms dropped. She took a slow, deep breath like she was finally letting some of the weight out. That night she didn't sleep near the hearth. She stood in the doorway of my room instead. No words, no invitation, just her presence, a quiet, solid anchor in the dark. I didn't ask what she wanted. I just pulled back the blanket and slid over. She climbed in beside me. No fear in her touch now. Her body was warm against mine. My arms settled lightly around her waist. We didn't speak. For the first time, neither of us had anything left we needed to explain. The morning was quiet, not in the usual way. Not the kind of quiet that came from windless days or being far from town. This was something closer shared inside these walls. Mika was still in my bed. She hadn't crept away during the night. She hadn't made herself small or distant. She lay on her side, a blanket wrapped around her waist, her back bare and warm against the morning light filtering through the cracked shutters. One of her legs was folded against mine, her hand resting near my ribs. Not possessive, not afraid, just there. I woke before her. I didn't move, just stared at the ceiling, listening to the steady breath of another human being in my bed, a sound I hadn't heard in years. It felt like it didn't belong at first. Then it did. Too much. My chest felt tight, not from fear, but from knowing. I didn't know what came next, but I knew I didn't want this to end. She stirred a soft rustle of blankets. She pulled the blanket tighter, rolled slowly, and looked at me. Her eyes weren't soft, but they weren't hard either. I didn't say anything. She reached up, brushed a hand along the edge of my jaw, rough with sleep stubble. Her fingers paused near the scar that ran along my ribs. I watched her, my heart a slow, steady drum in my chest. Her voice was low, a whisper. "What happened?" Saberblade. Back in 2064. Cold Harbor. I said it like it was nothing, like naming a place that didn't matter anymore. She nodded slowly, her thumb brushing across the scar once more. Then she said, "You don't talk in your sleep." I blinked. "That bother you?" "No, just strange. Men dream loud. You don't dream at all." I looked away toward the window. I stopped. Woke up in a world I didn't recognize. The nightmares were quieter than the silence. She didn't ask more, but I saw it. The way her expression changed just a little, like she understood something new about me just from that. We got up without saying anything else. I dressed boots first, then shirt. She wrapped herself in my blanket and crossed the room to get the shirt she'd been wearing, tugged it on without turning her back to me. Her body still bore bruises, but her posture was no longer defensive. She wasn't just surviving now. We had coffee together, standing at the table. She asked, "You always live like this?" I smirked faintly. "What way is that?" "Like the world already ended." I didn't answer right away. Then finally I said I lived through the part that felt like it did. Mika didn't push. She didn't need to. The silence between us had turned into something that said more than talk. It was a space of understanding. She spent that day helping me string wire along the south fence. I didn't ask her to, but when she saw the tools, she just picked one up and followed. She limped, still favoring the ankle, but pushed through it like it didn't matter. We worked side by side in the frigid air. The sun was a pale orb, a ghost in the sky. I showed her how to twist the tension right, how to anchor it with the cedar post. Her hands were strong, clumsy at first, but determined. At one point, the wire snapped loose, whipping her hand hard enough to cut the skin. She hissed, pulling her hand back. I stepped in fast, reached for her wrist. She tried to jerk away old instinct, but stopped when she saw my face. I held her hand firm and examined the wound. It's shallow, I said, but it'll bleed a while. She didn't wince when I cleaned it with a cloth. She just watched me. Then she said, "You touch gentle. Most men don't." I didn't look up. I'm not most. "You afraid of me?" That made me glance up. Her eyes held mine for a long moment. "No," I said without hesitation. "Are you?" "I was," she admitted. "Now, I don't know what I feel." That evening something shifted again. I was working on the porch steps, hammering down a warp board. Mika came out with a tin plate holding a fresh biscuit. Half burnt, half shaped, but it was hers. She handed it to me without ceremony. "I tried," she said. I took it, bit, chewed, swallowed. "Best damn biscuit I've had this week." She smirked. "It's Wednesday." I grinned for real then. First time in the whole damn story. That night we lay in the same bed. No blizzard outside, no threat, just us. We didn't speak much, but her fingers found my chest. My hand wrapped around her hip. She slid one leg over mine, and when our bodies pressed close, there was no hesitation anymore. She kissed me. Slow, warm, deliberate. She pulled my shirt off. I traced the line of her spine with my rough fingertips. Her breasts were soft against my chest, her breath hot against my neck. I asked quietly, "Are you sure?" She looked me straight in the eyes. Yes. And that night it wasn't about protection or survival. It was about choice. About her choosing me and me choosing to let someone touch the parts of myself I hadn't let anyone near in years. When it was over, we didn't roll apart. We stayed close still and both of us slept. Not just closed eyes, but real deep sleep. The wind had changed. It blew harder that morning, hot and dry, carrying a strange dust from the south. I noticed it right away in the way the horses shifted uneasily, ears twitching. The sky was clear, but the air held a tension like the land itself knew something was coming. I saddled one of the mares just after breakfast. Mika stood in the doorway, my shirt hanging loose over her curves, her hair still damp from washing it at the creek. "You going to town?" she asked. I nodded. "Need flour, salt, maybe more bandage wrap. Is it safe?" I paused with one boot in the stirrup. "Number. But I'll be back before sundown." She didn't try to stop me, but her eyes followed me until I was gone from sight. Dry Bend was 15 miles east. One street, 2 saloons, and more guns than decency. I didn't go there unless I had to, and I never lingered. Most folks knew better than to speak to me, but that didn't stop the stares, especially now. Especially after Finch had started whispering things. I kept my head down, got what I needed, and stayed out of trouble. But trouble didn't return the favor. As I stepped out of the store, 2 men crossed the street toward me. I recognized one, Jebediah, a big bastard who rode with Finch sometimes. The other was younger, nervous, already twitching near his belt. Jebediah spoke first. "McAllister." I didn't answer. "You still playing house with that squaw?" I didn't stop walking. Didn't flinch. The younger one snorted. "Word is she's warming your bed. Thought maybe we'd try our luck next time you're gone." I stopped. Turned. The street quieted around us. My voice was low even. "You got 10 seconds to shut your mouth and walk the other way." Jebediah smirked. "Or what, you gonna shoot us in the back like you did them rebels?" My jaw tightened, but I didn't reach for my gun. Instead, I walked right up to Jebediah and stared at him like a man looking through someone. I buried my wife and son before I ever laid a hand on another woman. "And if you or anyone else tries to come near my land again, I'll bury you too." Jebediah stepped back, spit hitting the dust near my boots. "Careful, McAllister. You ain't got no law out there. Just dirt. And that dirt's got memory." I didn't reply. I turned, mounted up, and rode out. But I felt their eyes on my back, and I knew the words wouldn't stop spreading. Back at the ranch, Mika was waiting. She stood by the gate when she saw me riding in. Something in her face told me she already knew. I dismounted, handed her the flower. I heard them, she said. I looked up. Heard what? Those men talking. From the hill. She pointed to the ridge above the creek. I went up there while you were gone. I swallowed. How many? 2. They left when you got close. You should have stayed near the house. I don't stay anymore, she said. That stopped me. She was different now. Stronger. More present. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't waiting for permission. She had chosen to stay, but not as something helpless. I respected that. But it didn't make the danger less real. That night I didn't sleep. I sat on the porch with a rifle across my lap watching the road. I didn't think they'd come yet, not tonight. But the kind of men who run their mouths also like to prove something, and they wouldn't forget what I'd said. Mika came out barefoot, wrapped in a blanket. You should rest, she said. I will. Later. She stood beside me a while in silence, then said, You fight them before they fight you. No, I said. But I won't let them decide what happens on my land. She nodded, then sat beside me. Her hand found mine under the blanket, worn fingers interlocking with mine. Not for comfort, but to say I'm here. I turned to her. You don't have to be part of this. I am part of this, she said. And just like that, the decision was made. We spent the next day preparing not for war, but for a message. I built a second gate near the edge of the property, reinforced the barn doors, moved supplies inside. Mika gathered stones and shaped them into a signal pile near the hill, something to burn if she needed to call me back quick. I taught her how to aim the rifle. She didn't flinch when it kicked. She hit the bottle on the second try. Good, I said. She lowered the barrel, adjusted her grip. They don't scare me. They should, I said. But fear doesn't mean you're weak. Just means you're thinking straight. She looked at me and said I thought I was dead when I crawled into that barn. I thought I was finished too, I said. Turns out we were both wrong. The morning came with silence again, but it wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence I knew well, the one just before a fight. The horses were restless. The birds had gone quiet. The wind didn't move. I saddled the bay and checked the rifle, then walked the edge of my land one more time. Fences held, gates were braced. Every step felt heavier than the last. When I came back, Mika was outside, sitting on the porch with a knife in one hand and a piece of jerky in the other. She was barefoot, my shirt tucked tight around her waist with a strip of torn cloth. Her ankle was still swollen, but she moved like it didn't matter. Her long hair was braided down one side. Her eyes were sharp. They're coming today, she said. I didn't ask how she knew. I just said I figured. We didn't speak much after that. No long speeches, no plans beyond Weight Watch stand. By noon we heard hooves. 3 riders, just like she'd said. One was Jebediah. Another was the younger one from Dry Bend, the twitchy one. The third was Deputy Finch, badge pinned to his chest like he thought it gave him more than it did. I stood in front of the porch, rifle in hand but pointed down. Mika stayed behind me, one hand resting against the side of the house. She didn't hide. She wanted them to see her. The riders stopped just inside the gate, not bothering to dismount. Finch called out, McAllister, you got one last chance to turn her over. I didn't move. She's under my roof. She's Apache. She's wanted. She's done nothing wrong. Finch's mouth twisted. Doesn't matter. Some things don't need proof. Town don't want her here. I'm not in town. Finch leaned forward. Then we take you both in. You gonna try it? I asked. For a moment no one moved. Then Jebediah shifted in the saddle, hand brushing over his holster. I raised my rifle, not aimed, just ready. Don't, I said. Finch's horse shifted. Think you can shoot all 3 of us before we shoot you? He asked, a sneer on his face. No, I said plainly. But I don't need to shoot all 3. Just the first one who reaches for her. Silence. Then Mika stepped down from the porch. My whole body tensed. She walked forward, stopped beside me, and raised her chin. She spoke loud enough to carry. You want to take me? Try. The men blinked. The younger one looked uncertain. Mika stepped closer still. I've bled. I've run. I've buried more than you'll ever know. If I fall, I'll take someone with me. Jebediah swallowed hard. I looked at Finch. You shoot here, I said, and you'll have to explain to a judge why a badge turned into a noose. You think the law cares about her? Finch barked. No, I nodded. That's why I care. Finch looked around. For the first time he realized he wasn't the one holding the tension. I wasn't backing down. Mika wasn't either. The younger man finally broke. This ain't worth it, he muttered. Finch glared. Jebediah shifted again but said nothing. and slowly, one by one, they turned their horses without another word. They rode off, and I stood there with Mika until the dust settled on the snow. Neither of us breathed for a long moment. Then I said, "They'll be back. Or worse will." Mika nodded. "I know. But now they know we won't run." She turned to me. "You didn't do that for justice. Number. You did it for me." I nodded, and she stepped into me, her arms sliding around my waist, her head against my chest. My hands came up holding her there. We didn't kiss. Not yet. We just held on. That night, we didn't light a lamp. We sat close in the dark beside the fire, our knees touching, her legs folded under her, my hand resting on hers. The warmth between us was no longer cautious. It was real. I spoke first. "You still want to leave one day?" She looked at me. "Number, not anymore." I didn't ask why, because I knew. She was already home. The winter gave way to a cold spring. The wind returned, but softer now, brushing over the land in quiet waves. The ranch stood silent but strong. Patched fences, a freshly mended barn door. The creek still running low but steady. For the first time in a long while, nothing felt urgent. A full week passed without riders. No strangers, no whispers. Just work and breath and days that stretched long like they were meant to. I carved new fence posts in the shade of the porch. Mika washed linens by the creek, humming sometimes, not a song I recognized, but it was soft and alive. Her ankle had healed enough that she no longer limped, though she still favored it after a full day's work. She didn't complain. She never had. Each morning I made 2 cups of coffee. Each night she lit the fire. We didn't talk much about what came next. We didn't need to. One afternoon I came into the house and found her standing near the window, wearing nothing but one of my shirts. It was open halfway loose around her waist, brushing the top of her thighs. Her hair was down, unbraided, wet from the creek. Sunlight lit her skin golden. The shape of her body was clear under the thin cotton. I stopped in the doorway. She turned to me, not startled, not shy, just steady. "I never thought I'd live like this," she said. "Not with someone." I stepped forward. "You think it's going to end?" She shrugged. "I used to think everything ended. And now?" She looked me in the eyes. "Now I'm scared it won't." I moved to her, rested my hands on her waist. "I ain't the kind of man who makes promises," I said. "But if you stay, I'll build whatever life you want. I don't care what town thinks. I don't care who remembers your name or mine." She reached up, pressed her palm to my chest. "I already stayed," she said, and then we kissed. Real, full, deep. Her body against mine, her bare legs sliding between my own. Our hands moved slow, exploring each other with more certainty than before. This time it wasn't about protection or need. It was about knowing we had time, that we could build something out of the wreckage. The next week I took her into town. Heads turned. Some men stared, others looked away. Finch didn't show his face. Mika wore a clean dress I had bartered for from a trader woman in Tucson. It didn't fit perfectly, but it was hers. Blue cotton, low at the neckline, snug at the waist. She walked beside me, not behind me, not beneath me. People moved out of our way, not because of fear, but because of the way we carried ourselves. At the store I bought nails and oil. Mika picked out fabric for curtains. At the edge of town a boy asked if she was my wife. I paused. I looked at her. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away. I answered him clear and flat. "She is." No one argued. No one dared. Back at the ranch that night, we sat together on the porch. The stars came out slow. The land stretched dark around us. She leaned against me. "Do you still hear them?" she asked. "Who?" "The ghosts." I was quiet. "Sometimes," I said, "but they don't feel as loud. Not since you started making noise here." She reached over and took my hand. "Then let's keep making noise." I kissed her fingers, and in the dark beneath the open sky, the wind carried no threat. Only the sound of 2 people who had survived everything but each other. Enjoying these epic Wild West stories? Hit subscribe for more gripping tales of bravery, conflict, and unexpected heroes. Now tap the video on screen to experience a story with a twist you'll never forget.